Hello, welcome to Guide London. My name is Nick Salmond. I'm a London Blue Badge tourist guide and a member of the Association of Professional Tourist Guides, that is the organisation behind the Guide London website. And you're watching one of our regular videos that we're broadcasting every Tuesday, UK time, at 4 o'clock in the afternoon to bring you a little bit of London, because at the moment we are unable to welcome visitors to London and do our usual guiding around the city. So we're trying to bring a little bit of London to you virtually. Now, over the last year, we've had broadcasts on all kinds of aspects of life in London, some of our great buildings, some of the history, some of the people who lived here. And you can find them all on our YouTube channel or on Facebook. All you have to do is go and search for Guide London. And do subscribe to our videos on YouTube. Then you get a little reminder whenever we broadcast a new talk. And it also helps to spread the word amongst people who are looking for information about London. So share them with your friends as well. If you've got friends and family who you think will be interested in learning a little bit about London, then do share our videos with them. Now today we've got something slightly different in that we're not concentrating on a particular building in London or a particular person. What we're going to do today is look at some areas of London that have a very distinctive link. They are all UNESCO World Heritage sites. Now, you may know in the world there are over 1,000, in fact, there's 1,121 UNESCO World Heritage sites, and 4 of those UNESCO World Heritage sites are here in London. And I'm delighted to say that I'm joined today by Themis Halvantzi-Stringer, who is a London Blue Badge tourist guide. She's going to tell us a little bit about the UNESCO World Heritage system, about how sites qualify to be listed as a World Heritage site. And she's going to tell us a bit about those 4 sites in London that are World Heritage listed. We are broadcasting live, so any questions you've got, just put them in the comments. We'll try and answer them at the end of the programme. And tell us where you're watching from as well. And also if you've got a favourite World Heritage site that you want us to talk about. So, without more ado, I'm going to hand over to Themis, who's going to tell us about the World Heritage sites. Themis.
Thank you very much, Nick. And hello, everyone. Well, the idea for this talk came because in 2020, I actually graduated from an MA in World Heritage Studies. And I found the subject very interesting. And I thought, well, since I am a Blue Badge tourist guide, why don't I do a broadcast based on World Heritage? So what we're going to do today is that we're going to look at how the UNESCO World Heritage started and what it means to be inscribed as a World Heritage site. And we're going to look at 4 examples from my hometown of London. Now, World Heritage sites are very, very popular, and every year they receive an awful lot of visitors. Well, most of them, not all of them. And there are even some very dedicated travelers who will go to great lengths to collect World Heritage sites. Now, as Nick mentioned, London has 4 World Heritage sites. The UK has 32 in total. And you can see the 4 London ones on the map. If we start from the left side, we have the very first one, which is the Royal Botanic Gardens at Kew. And then right in the center, we have an area that has 3 buildings: the Palace of Westminster, Westminster Abbey, and St. Margaret's Church. And then further east, we have the Tower of London. The last World Heritage site is a Maritime Greenwich, and it's the furthest right red dot that you can see on the map. But you might have noticed there is actually a red dot at the bottom right-hand side of the screen. What is that? Well, it's a World Heritage site in waiting. This is Down House, which is the place where Charles Darwin lived, and it's not a heritage site yet. It is in waiting. It is in the tentative list, as it is called. But because it's within the M25, the circular motorway that goes all the way around London, we'll consider it as London. You can give me that one. Now, we have to go to the beginning of UNESCO as an organization. We have to go back to the end of the Second World War. So in 1946, the organization was established. And what does it stand for? It is an acronym for the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. So it is these words that make up the acronym. And as you see, education and science actually take precedent over culture. It is indeed they are indeed much more important for UNESCO than culture itself. That's why they're named first, and they absorb a lot more of the funds than culture. World Heritage isn't mentioned, but it is a part of culture. And it is actually the most high profile of all the activities that UNESCO does. Heritage might not be mentioned, but it is actually present in the UNESCO logo. If you noticed, the logo is actually in the form of a Greek temple, and the letters make the columns that support the whole structure. So it is an important cultural building. Now, the organization works through conventions or meetings, which happen every year, and they issue recommendations or suggestions. They make declarations. In 2 words, the whole work of UNESCO is setting standards. And there are, as I mentioned, conventions every year, but some of them are much more important for the organization and the world than others. So, for example, we have the 1954 Convention for the Protection of Cultural Property in the event of armed conflict. Now, that's quite a mouthful, but that's exactly the convention that we go back to every time we have issues with destruction of cultural properties, like, for example, when the Bamiyan Buddhas in Afghanistan were destroyed in 2001. Now, other important conventions are the 1972 Convention for the Protection of World Cultural and Natural Heritage. So for the first time, there is an introduction of nature and landscapes together with cultural properties, meaning buildings or structures. And the third important convention is the 2003 Convention for the Safeguarding of Intangible Cultural Heritage. So UNESCO now not only supports and looks after and declares buildings and structures as World Heritage, but it also looks after cultural expressions such as songs, theatre, ways of life, all sorts of intangible things that we can't touch things. And you might be wondering, what on earth do I have a picture of a Finnish sauna, and what does that have to do with UNESCO? Well, in 2020, the Finnish sauna was inscribed, was admitted in the list of intangible cultural heritage. And it's in very good company, because other cultural expressions are, for example, the Beijing opera, the Argentinian tango, Indian yoga, or Turkish coffee ceremony, or the Mediterranean diet. So all these things are intangible cultural heritage. Interestingly, neither the UK nor the USA have made any proposals for intangible cultural heritage to be included in the list. But maybe that will be something that will come in the next few years. Now we're going to travel back in time a bit, and we're going to go to the late 1950s. You see in your picture the temple of Ramses II at Abu Simbel. And this is a very important moment in UNESCO, because the Egyptian government asked for UNESCO's help to preserve the temple. they were building a new dam in Aswan, and the Nile waters would have submerged the temple. So after lots of consultations and about 4 years of work by archaeologists and engineers, and about $40 million at the time, the temple was moved further up on the cliffs, and it was preserved for posterity. But it was that exact work that actually made UNESCO world known. There were lots of articles. The whole world was interested in the endeavor. There were lots and lots of reporting, TV programs about the Abu Simbel temple. So it was a cause célèbre. And it was actually what influenced UNESCO to include in their 1972 convention 3 words that today are the basis of every World Heritage Site. And these 3 words are outstanding universal value. So in order for a world site to become World Heritage, they have to have these 3 words. It basically means that it isn't just important, a place is not just important for the country or the nation that has it, it is important for the whole world. And not just for today, not for the present generations, but for the future generations of humanity. So that's what outstanding universal value means. It is basically an expression of what is absolutely best in humanity. To further enhance outstanding universal value, then a World Heritage Site has to show also authenticity and integrity. Authenticity means that a site needs to be used pretty much in the same way as it was originally designed. So, for example, Kew Gardens, that we mentioned at the beginning, still continues to be a botanical garden. Or, for example, the Westminster Abbey continues to be a church. Integrity means that the building needs to be continuing in the same way as it was originally designed. So the Tower of London is pretty much the same structure as it was originally. So when we start examining our 4 London sites, we will see them through these 3 words: outstanding universal value, and we will see on whether also they exhibit authenticity and integrity. So we will be looking them through the UNESCO World Heritage glasses, and I'll put mine on as well. Now, looking first to Kew Gardens, we're not just talking about a single garden. This is a large area. It has about 300 acres of gardens, or 120 hectares. And it is in the west part of London. And it isn't just the garden itself. There are all sorts of other things as well. They are, for example, the glass houses, the iron structures, the iron glass houses that you can see in the gardens. For example, the Temperate House on your left side, on the bottom left, or the Palm House on the top right. And these 2 have actually been the models for glass houses around the world. Kew Gardens is also connected with important people for ecology and botany. One of them is a gentleman called Joseph Banks, who actually was one of the first directors of Kew Gardens in 1797. Now, Joseph Banks could actually be another broadcast on his own, because he's such an interesting personality. But to summarize him, we can say that he is one of the first people to travel around the world and collect species for scientific research in botany. He traveled with Captain Cook. He went to South Africa. He went to Brazil, where he, for the first time, wrote the scientific explanation for a garden plant that you might possibly have, and that is a bougainvillea. So he was very, very well known at his time. But it's not only just these things that make Kew an important World Heritage Site. There are other structures there. So, for example, we have the orangery, which you can see at the bottom right of your slide, or Queen Charlotte's house, which is at the top right, or the pagoda. And it is all these structures and all the connections with artists and botanists that make Kew important, that give it its outstanding universal value. So we can say that Kew Gardens contributed to the advancement of scientific disciplines such as botany and ecology. That the landscaped gardens were actually created by celebrated artists such as Charles Bridgman, Lancelot Capability Brown, William Kent, and William Chambers. And these artists themselves actually further influenced internationally. They had an international influence. And finally, the gardens at Kew are associated with scientific and economic exchanges throughout the world. What about authenticity and integrity? Well, it still remains a garden, a botanical garden. And today, Kew actually has over 8.5 million items, and it houses the largest and most complex collection of plants and mushrooms in the world. So both of these criteria of authenticity and integrity are present. Now, the next site that we're going to see, I'm sure you've either visited it last time that you were in London, or you have seen it on your television or in your in magazines and newspapers. And this is the area around Westminster. Now, it's not just one building. We have at least 3 buildings in this area, and it is the Houses of Parliament that you can see on the bottom right, at the bottom left of your screen, and Westminster Abbey that you can see on the top left, and also St. Margaret's Church, which is the little white building behind Big Ben on your right. So these 3 structures make the UNESCO World Heritage Site of Westminster. Now, the importance of these structures lies in the fact that the buildings are symbolic of monarchy, religion, and power. The very first king to actually build a palace and a church here was Edward the Confessor, all the way back in the 11th century. And in addition, they also represent the movement from feudal monarchy, from feudal history to modern democracy. So looking at the outstanding universal value of these buildings, we can tell that they were inscribed because Westminster Abbey and St. Margaret's are prime examples of the development of Gothic art. That the Abbey, the architecture of Westminster Abbey, has influenced Gothic architecture throughout the whole of the United Kingdom, and also has influenced the 19th century architects Charles Barry and Augustus Pugin, who built the Houses of Parliament, the Palace of Westminster. And the third one is that the Abbey, the Palace, and St. Margaret's illustrate the movement of history, the passing from parliamentary monarchy to the system that we have, to the political system that we have today. So they can be seen as encapsulating the whole of the history of the United Kingdom. Are they authentic and do they have integrity? Well, absolutely. Let's take, for example, Westminster Abbey, which still is a church. It is the place where every single British monarch, with the exception of 2, have been crowned. where some royal weddings have happened. Queen Elizabeth was married in Westminster Abbey. Her mother was also married in Westminster Abbey. And if you're a British monarch, then you might have been buried in Westminster Abbey too. We have 12 royal burials in Westminster Abbey. So all these reasons make them a unique representation for outstanding universal value. Is it really the same if you come from another country? Well, maybe yes, maybe no, but that's for you to decide. Something that definitely again connects with royal history is our next World Heritage Site, and that is the Tower of London, or the Tower as we call it. It is not just one structure, it's a complex, as you can see, but the very central part, the White Tower, is a prime example of 11th century military architecture. It is a palace fortress. It was built by William the Conqueror, and it is the square building that you can see right at the center of the whole of the complex. And then you have around it two circles of fortification, which were built in later times in the 13th and 14th century. Now, this building, this structure, this whole complex is also connected with religious history, because in the 15th and 16th century, either Catholic or Protestant prisoners were held in the tower, and some of them, very few of them, were executed in the vicinity, inside the complex. So the reasons for the outstanding universal value of this building is that it is a symbol, an absolute symbol of military architecture, dating back to William the Conqueror. And this style of architecture has influenced other castles in the United Kingdom. And also that it is a major reference in the history of medieval architecture. Is it authentic and does it have integrity? Well, absolutely. Yes, of course, there have been restorations, there have been changes. Some buildings disappeared forever, other buildings were made. But if we could go back in time, if we had a time machine, and we brought a 15th or 16th century craftsman to today's London, then they would recognize the materials, they would recognize the form, they would recognize the structure as they experienced it in their own lifetime. Now, we're moving further east, and we're going to see the last of our UNESCO World Heritage Sites in London, and this is Maritime Greenwich. Again, it is not just one structure, there are several, and actually all of them are set out in a huge big park, which makes it a really pleasant place to visit. And it includes the Queen's House, which is at the bottom right side of your screen. Excuse me. The Queen's House was built by an architect called Inigo Jones, and it's the first ever example of classical or Palladian architecture in the United Kingdom. It is also an absolute expression of the power of the British monarchy. How does it do that? Well, imagine you're 17th century ambassador, and you're arriving in London, and you disembark in Greenwich, because that is the gateway to London, and you see in front of you this absolutely magnificent, imposing white structure. And this building belongs to the British monarch. Are you impressed or are you not? Of course you are. And that's exactly what the architect intended with his building. We also have a late 17th century building, which you can see on the top left side of your screen, which is the Royal Naval Hospital, which was built by Sir Christopher Wren. And this is a prime example of Baroque architecture in the United Kingdom. Christopher Wren also designed and built, with the help of the astronomer Royal Hooke, the Royal Observatory that you can see on the top right side of your screen. And the observatory is not only important as a building, but it is also important for its contribution to maritime and to maritime history and to astronomy. Have you heard of GMT, Greenwich Mean Time? Well, it is named after Greenwich. Or the first Meridian line, which is also going just in front of the Royal Observatory in Greenwich. So for all these reasons, Greenwich is an important site, and it has outstanding universal value. So the buildings are the expressions of the best artistic endeavors that architecture had to express at the time. The importance of the two architects, Christopher Wren and Inigo Jones, for Europe, but also for the United Kingdom, is another reason for the outstanding universal value. The Queen's House, the Royal Naval College, and the Royal Park demonstrate the power, the patronage, and the importance of the British Crown, and the importance of the contributions to science and to astronomy and maritime history are also the connections with the Royal Observatory. And of course, we also have integrity and authenticity. As I mentioned at the beginning, the Royal Observatory is actually still housing some of the original instruments that were used for astronomical calculations. Now we will finish with the last property in the vicinity of London, which is Down House, the place where Charles Darwin lived for 42 years of his life. And as I mentioned, Down House is not yet in the World Heritage list. It is in the waiting list, the tentative list. But once it will be inscribed, it will not be just for the house and the connections to the man. They will also inscribe a wider landscape of about 7 square kilometers, which includes the two nearby villages of Down and Codham. And it is this landscape that gave Charles Darwin the ideas and the chance to do his scientific experiments and to develop his origin of the species. So we're not inscribing the man, we're inscribing the landscape and the connections to the specific theory. So did you know that Charles Darwin is actually buried inside Westminster Abbey, right next to two other absolutely important scientists for Britain and for the world, Sir Isaac Newton and Stephen Hawking? Now, if you're bored of London and you've done all the World Heritage sites that you can do, then you can head out, because we have another 32 to choose from. And you can collect, for example, Canterbury Cathedral, which is the seat of the Archbishop of Canterbury. Or you can go a bit further west to Stonehenge, which is a great prehistoric monument and a true British cultural icon. Or you could go to the Georgian town of Bath, which is now most probably more commonly known as Bridgerton of the Netflix fame. A lot of the filmings of Bridgerton have actually happened in Bath, though it's supposed to be London. So you have lots and lots of different options to go for, and when COVID allows us to travel again, then you can continue with your collecting. So thank you very much for listening to me. I hope you've enjoyed this broadcast, and let's go back to Nick.
Themis, thank you so much. A fascinating look around some of the most important places in London. It's amazing, isn't it, to think you could come to London, you could spend a week here, and you could just visit World Heritage sites while you were here in London and the surrounding area.
Absolutely. There's so much to explore. When you start seeing the connections with other places and other parts, then you can really see why they are so important. Somebody said to me, well, shouldn't there be more than these 4 heritage sites in London? Well, absolutely. But unless you decide to inscribe the whole city, which does have a lot of problems actually, because you can't change certain things, then I think we'll do with 4.
So if you've got any questions for Themis, then do put them in the comments. We are here for another 5 minutes or so we can try and answer them before that. Tell us, how do you get listed as a World Heritage Site? Like Down House, is it something the country has to put you forward for, or do United Nations UNESCO come and make suggestions and go around the world looking for places?
Yes, well, countries have to propose sites. So they're called state parties in the UNESCO parlance. And you have to be, of course, a member of UNESCO, otherwise you can't propose something. But it is something that to propose a new UNESCO World Heritage Site not only takes time, because you have to create the work that will prove the outstanding universal value of the site, but it also has an awful lot of expenses. It is estimated that it costs about £750,000 at least for one World Heritage Site to be inscribed. And that's money that you spend while the site is waiting, because of course it has to wait for a while before it becomes one. So it's not something that state parties take easily.
And sites can be delisted, can't they? I noticed on the website, the UNESCO website, there are 2 sites that is listed as delisted.
Yes, absolutely. You can be delisted. The reasons for delisting are actually quite interesting, because when you inscribe a property, then certain criteria have to be followed. And if you deviate from that criteria, then these are causes for delisting. One of the most famous ones was the site in Germany, where they had inscribed a natural landscape. But the people of the area wanted actually to build a bridge which would very much aid communication between different towns and cities. But that was seen as being an intervention, something that was not in the original inscription of the site. So that's why it was the Elbe Valley, actually. That's why the Elbe Valley in Germany was delisted.
Fascinating. We've got a few comments here. Julie is in what she says is a very wet Liverpool at the moment. Now, Liverpool at the moment is a UNESCO site, isn't it? Part of Liverpool, but that is under danger. Why is that under danger?
Well, it's a very interesting thing, because Liverpool was inscribed for the maritime connections. It is basically the waterfront and certain buildings. But on the back of Liverpool being city of culture for Europe, the local council decided to do development which was not included in the original listing. And UNESCO felt that that was changing the nature of the listing. So that's why they placed it in the in danger list. But I know that Liverpool is trying really hard to address the problems and to see what can be done in conjunction with UNESCO. So hopefully it won't happen.
Fingers crossed.
It will come off the list.
A few other comments. Penny is in Bedford, snowy Bedford, which I don't think has UNESCO listing yet. Victoria says brilliant news about Down House. She was helped to bring tourist guides to do some of the tours down there. It's not the easiest place to get, is it? It's not really on public transport. But if you've got especially a driver guide, it's quite quite easy to get to from central London.
Yes, absolutely.
Could you write?
Sorry, Nick. Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say that it is only 19, either 19 or 21 kilometers southeast of London. So it is within the M25, but it's a bit difficult to get there without the use of a private car.
Great. So this is Gujarat Tours. I know there are some UNESCO sites in Gujarat. I think Ahmedabad is listed there. So Ruby in Canada says very interesting talk. Andrea is watching us from Winchester, Virginia. I think there are some UNESCO sites in Virginia as well. I think Monticello, former home of Thomas Jefferson, is listed.
Yes.
So there's sites all around the world.
You can actually go to the UNESCO website and they have an interactive map of the world where you can actually see all the different panes and you can plot your journeys for the future if you want to collect World Heritage sites.
There's worse things in the world you can collect, I think, than going visiting all the World Heritage sites.
Absolutely.
Elizabeth is, thank you very much, very interesting. She loves Kew Gardens, don't we all?
It is an absolute gem, actually. Kew Gardens are fantastic, and if you haven't visited, I really thoroughly recommend them next time that you can.
And I think they're one of the few sites that are still open at the moment, even in the pandemic. I think you can still visit Kew. You certainly could till recently.
I think so. It's the buildings that you're not allowed to go inside, but the gardens are still accessible.
Yeah, so just double check on the website before you make any journeys, is my tip. Ruby says, yep, great. Fiona, thank you. Interesting to think of them as a group of sites, which is, yep, very true. Thank you, sir. Lots of comments about people finding it very interested. And there's another one. The fortified city of Bergamo is another World Heritage.
Well, Italy, it is a joke in UNESCO circles that Italy has so many heritage sites that we might as well inscribe the whole country because it is so outstanding in the history and art of the world. So they are doing a great job there, the Italians.
Great job. Yeah, absolutely. So go to the website, the UNESCO website. You can find the interactive map there. It tells you all about the sites. So how many have we got in the UK, did you say?
32.
32. Okay.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much, Themis, for telling us all about it today. If you want to know more about Themis or you want to know more about any of our sites, then the best place to go to is our website, guidelondon.org.uk. You can search for all the guides there. And you can also look at the different tours we do. So if you want to know more about any of the sites Themis has talked about today, you can go to our website, you can search for information. You can also go back on our YouTube channel because we have done individual programs on most of the sites that we've talked about today. So certainly we've done one on Kew Gardens, we've done one on Westminster Abbey, we've done one on the Tower of London, we've done one on Greenwich. So go back and you'll find full programs on all those sites there, which will give you a bit more information. Or go and search our tours. Most of the all you have to do is search on tours at the top, and that will give you all the different tours that our guys do. And you can see that we have Greenwich one there. You see that will take you and tell you a little bit about the sites of Greenwich. I think we've got Westminster Abbey there as well, and we've also got some blogs as well. So if you want to learn more about these different sites, we do have some blogs on the different sites as well. And a lot of the tours that we do, which we would usually do in person, you can do virtually at the moment. So if you're interested in doing a virtual tour of central London or some of the sites in central London, then all you have to do is go and look for London Virtual Tour on our website, and that gives you a little bit more information about all the different types of tours we do. And there's also a contact form at the bottom. You just fill in your details, say what you want to go and see, send it off, and then some of our guides will get back to you and let you know exactly how much that will cost and the sort of things that we can do. So there's a lot to explore on the website. So guidelondon.org.uk is the address to go to. Thanks again so much, Themis, for today. It was a wonderful talk. We'll see you again soon. And thank you to everyone watching wherever you are in the world. We'll be back next Tuesday with another broadcast. And I think next Tuesday we're going to look at some of the locations in London that were used in some of the James Bond movies. So join us next Tuesday for that. Same time, 4 o'clock UK time. That's 11 a.m. if you're in the East Coast of America. So from all of us, for the moment, goodbye.